When people talk about building income systems, they usually imagine construction. Something designed from the top down, a plan, a blueprint, a sequence of steps that, if followed correctly, results in a working machine. But real income systems are rarely assembled that way. They don't begin with design. They begin with observation. They don't start with a full structure. They start with small pieces of movement that already exist and slowly get connected. Most people who struggle to build systems aren't missing information. They're trying to assemble something that hasn't formed any parts yet. They're arranging concepts instead of relationships. And because of that, everything they build feels forced. Actual systems assemble themselves in the opposite direction. First, something moves. Then, something repeats. Then something stabilizes. Then something gets connected. Assembly only happens once there is something to assemble. Before that point, there is only experimentation. This is why the earliest stage of any system feels unimpressive. You're not building a machine. You're noticing behavior. You're watching how people respond when something meets them. You're paying attention to what continues, what disappears, and what quietly comes back. Out of that, small, reliable movements begin to appear. A certain type of question keeps being asked. A certain kind of person keeps returning. A certain problem keeps surfacing. A certain result keeps being noticed. Those repetitions are not content signals. They are components. They are the first parts of a system. Most people overlook them because they don't look like assets. They look like noise. But in system assembly, repetition is material. It's what everything else is built from. An income system doesn't start as a whole. It starts as several tiny working parts that have nothing to do with each other yet. A place attention gathers. A moment trust forms. A point exchange happens. A step someone keeps taking. A result someone keeps wanting. Each of those is a partial structure. Assembly begins when those partial structures are brought into relationship. This is why systems don't assemble through planning. They assemble through connection. You notice that the same people who ask this question also struggle at this step. You notice that the people who reach this point often drop here. You notice that when this result happens, something else tends to follow. Those often moments are where assembly begins. You start linking what is already occurring, not inventing flows, clarifying them, not forcing paths, smoothing them, not building structures, reducing friction between existing movements. This is also why system assembly always feels slower than tactics and faster than businesses. It's slower than tactics because you can't rush observation. You have to let behavior repeat. You have to see enough examples for patterns to be real instead of imagined. But it's faster than building businesses because you're not committing to containers. You're not locking design. You're not scaling guesses. You're shaping what is already active. Actual assembly looks less like construction and more like fitting. You take something that already moves and you make it easier to move. You take two things that already happen and you place them closer together. You take a place people often stop and you add clarity. You take a result that often ends things and you give it a next step. Each of those changes is small. None of them look like building a system. But over time, continuity begins to form. One step starts leading to another. One interaction increases the chance of the next. One result begins opening the door to something else. When that happens, the system stops feeling like a set of actions and starts feeling like a path. That path is the system. Everything else is infrastructure. This is why people who assemble systems correctly often struggle to explain what they're doing while they're doing it. From the outside, it looks like they're just making small adjustments. clarifying something here, adding something there, removing something else. But inside those changes, relationships are forming. The moment attention reliably leads to engagement, a system edge appears. The moment engagement reliably leads to exchange, a system interior appears. The moment exchange reliably leads to outcome, a system core appears. The moment outcome reliably leads to return or referral, a system perimeter appears. Assembly is the gradual strengthening of those relationships. Not the creation of parts, but the linking of parts. This also explains why many systems break when they grow. They were never assembled. They were stacked. More content was added. More offers were added. More tools were added. More people were added. But relationships between the parts were never strengthened. So load increased, but flow did not. When pressure came, nothing carried it. Everything bottlenecked. Everything routed back to effort. A real system carries load because its parts are connected. One movement supports the next. One action creates conditions for another. One result feeds the beginning. This is what assembly actually produces: circulation, not volume. Circulation is when value doesn't just move forward, but comes back in another form. Learning becomes improvement. Improvement becomes clarity. Clarity becomes better movement. Better movement becomes better learning. Once circulation exists, you're no longer building. You're maintaining. Before circulation exists, there is nothing to maintain. This is also why systems are never finished. They're assembled enough to function, and then they're continuously reassembled as behavior changes. New friction appears. New misunderstandings emerge. New desires surface. Old steps stop working. Each of those requires relinking, not rebuilding. You don't tear down the system. You adjust relationships inside it. Assembly never ends because behavior never stops evolving. The mistake most builders make is trying to assemble before parts exist. They design journeys without movement. They build funnels without flow. They create products without paths. They optimize systems that don't yet circulate. The result is always the same: complexity without coherence. Actual assembly is simpler than that. You let parts emerge. You watch them repeat. You connect what already works. You strengthen what already moves. Over time, something subtle happens. The system begins to anticipate. Instead of reacting to every interaction, you start to see what's likely to happen next. Instead of creating new actions, you start shaping transitions. Instead of producing outputs, you start managing relationships. That shift marks the moment a system is truly assembled. Not when everything is built, but when movement becomes predictable enough to be shaped. At that point, tools make sense. Automation makes sense. Delegation makes sense. Scale becomes possible because there is now something real to multiply. Without that, growth is just noise. How income systems are actually assembled is not through construction. It's through recognition and connection. You recognize what is already happening. You connect what is already repeating. You strengthen what is already moving. And slowly, through many small linkages, something that was once scattered becomes coherent. When coherence appears, income stops feeling like something you chase and starts feeling like something you steward, because the system is no longer being forced. It's being assembled around reality.